has been spreading. Few agendas. So what's going to happen today? We will have an introduction, an Excel workshop project. So what we're doing today, and we'll pretty much go through a bit of that through a Google Doc, which we'll get you guys to open shortly, and pretty much go through each of the steps for the Excel workshop. Then we'll have a Q&A. If you have any questions regarding any of the steps that we have for the Excel event, feel free to ask them, and we'll be happy to come around. Then the working project section. So this is a bit where you guys will be doing all the parts for the Excel workshop. And by the very end, you should have a general understanding of a few of the stuff that we'll be going through during our Excel workshop. And then finally, a conclusion and a word from Andre as well. So let's do a quick introduction. Who are we? Well, today we have NSOC and Canopy Study. So I'm your host, Neil. I'm a Professional and Education Director at NSOC. And we also have Andre.
Hi, I'm Andre. I am the co-founder of Canopy Study. I also am an accountant for a firm called Walker Whalen as well. So my, expertise in Excel would mostly relate towards my work as an accountant. So I'll give you kind of some insights in the whole world and what we use for that, as well as, a little bit about Canopy Study later on.
And then we have a few other people. We have Sarah, Kayla, and Tracy. Do you guys want to talk very quickly?
Hey guys, my name is Sarah. Okay. And I am in my fourth year of biomedical engineering.
Hi guys, I'm Tracy. I'm on the boat as well.
I can probably see.
Okay.
Hi guys, I'm Kayla.
I'm my third year of data engineering, and my role is social justice. Keen to go through the questions today.
So hopefully you guys are a bit aware about each of the people here today. And if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll come around and help you guys. So as people sort of join in, I know some people might be still coming through, either on Zoom or in person. So we'll pretty much just go through what sort of things we'll be going through today. So during the Excel workshop, we'll be going through a few different types of things. So working with basic formula. So how do you calculate stuff? How do you use a calculator on Excel, pretty much? How do you start it? And different types of formulas that you can use on Excel. Next thing we have is building tables. So how do you use different types of data and expressing it in a way in a table? Utilizing tables, graphs. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we'll be utilizing one set of table and using different types of graphs to see how it can be represented in a graphical format. So we'll look at kind of line graphs, pie charts, column graphs, any sort of different types of graphs, as well as changing the data like the X and Y axis to see how it relates and how it kind of flows into a graph, which would be nice. The next thing we'll kind of work on too is we'll flow into a pivot table, where essentially it's a summarization of a data table, a lot of data that you might usually have, and it kind of summarizes it based on your requisites that you have. Then we'll lastly go into a thing called conditional formatting, where we kind of just format the text based on certain rules that you might place, and you can make it a different colors where it changes different colors based on your own rules that you have, as well as any sort of arrows and other sort of little features you can include later on.
Okay, so as people start joining through shortly, we'll have you guys open up the Excel Google Doc, if you guys can, very quickly. We have a link up there. Do we have any problems? No? Okay. So once you open up the Excel document, you should see something sort of like this. So this is pretty much each of the steps that we'll be going through for you guys to do yourselves throughout the Excel workshop. We'll answer any of the questions that you guys have throughout the day, throughout the workshop. And by the end, you should have 5 different sheets which go through each of the stuff that we mentioned before, including, as we mentioned, basic formulae, building tables, utilizing tables for graphs, pivot tables, and condition formatting. So I'll get you guys to get started, I guess. Use the Google Doc, and if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll go through each of the stuff regarding this Google Doc link, okay? So let's get started. Okay. So pretty much what is basic formulas? How do we conduct formulas on Excel? So as you guys might be aware, whenever we actually write a function on Excel, we got to use the equal sign, right? So this is pretty much the basic starter for formulas. You'll use this for every different calculation you use on Excel. And with different types of calculations, whether it be addition, well, fairly straightforward, as you can see on the Google Doc, we have the addition sign, and that allows you to add different types of values, right? So whether you want to input certain numbers into your calculation, it gives you an answer at the very bottom, or if you want to actually use particular cells. So let me get that going very quickly. So for example, if I had a value here and I had a value over here, and I wanted to add each of these values on 2 different cells, I would shift click likewise, and then I'll do the same for my next cell. And as a result, it should add each of these cells together and give me my answer. Fairly straightforward. Likewise with subtraction, well, again, you just change your answer or change your equation to subtraction. Whoops. Right, simple as that, and it gives you your answer. Multiplication, well, multiplication is again very similar. Instead of using a multiplication sign, you use an asterisk sign. So it looks something like that. And then divide is just the slash key. Okay, we'll get you guys to sort of do that and play around with that. So you guys should have been able to mess around and use each of the calculations as mentioned above. So addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So now we're going to go very quickly through sum, if, and if. So sum, as you guys probably know, is just the addition of each of your values. So whenever you want to actually type in a type of thing that you want to calculate, you can write that value, so sum, and then press tab, and that actually selects the specific one you want to use, okay? So for example, if I wanted to have the sum of this cell and this cell, it would give me the sum of all the types of cells I had. So let's, for example, instead of two values, say, for example, I had a lot of different values here, right? So let's say, for example, it was each of these values in a whole table, right? So adding values can be quite annoying and quite difficult. So whenever we have different types of value inputs on Excel, we can very quickly add each of these values instead of individually having to add each of these values on a calculator, right? It saves you a lot of time. So let's actually add each of these values in the table. And voila, you get the addition sum of each and every one of these values together. So let's try that out. That's sum, and we'll get if and if done shortly. For Hanadi, if you're finding everything okay, because I know you are on Zoom, just give us a thumbs up. Okay, sweet. Okay, we'll give you guys probably a minute.
Perfect. So has everyone done the sum formula? Everyone good?
Can we get a few thumbs up? Yep.
All right. So let's move on to the next one or two formulas. So the next one we have here is an if formula. And I find an if formula is one of the most awesome formulas there is because it kind of solves all problems when necessary. So as some of you might be aware, an if statement kind of has three steps to it. There's the condition, the outcome if the condition exceeds or works, and the outcome if it fails as well. So what you'd have to do is, like you have done with the sum and like you will do with most formulas, is you'd have to start with your if and then, or your equals, then you type in the kind of statement you're doing, which is if. And you'll notice when you type it in, there's a few others that pop up, but we'll just go along with the if formula for now. So once you see that, like Neil said, you can just click tab. And this will show a little box kind of thing where it shows a logical test, a value of true and a value of false. So this will kind of help you out in the instance, you know, you're confused on the order. So let's just start off with the logical test. So this is, you can keep it as simple as necessary. So this time we'll do a greater than or a less than, but we'll do a greater than now. So let's just say that cell cell 13, C13 here, is greater than D13. So we're saying if C13 is greater than D13, then we'd have to make sure that we do a comma like this. And once you do that, you'll notice that from logical test the value of true, it's now highlighted the value of true, which now means that we're now working on that little section of it, which is the condition if it's true. And so if we're saying if C13 is greater than D13, then for this instance, we'll say we want it to import C8. We want it to say C8. So if C13 is greater than D13, we want it to show the number 9. If this is false, we want it to show, let's just say, number 7 over here. So if we then put our closing bracket to tie off the whole formula and we click enter, it will show the number 7. And the reason for that is because, well, pretty sure 86 is greater than 7. So therefore, since C13 is less than 86, we're only showing this number over here. So if I just change this number just to something that's more different, you'll see that it flows through that. Now, just for another example to see it flow through, is if we had this number greater than this number, so we'll put this at like 2, it will show the number 9 here. So does everyone want to give a crack the if statement 1 here, following the steps of the cells and seeing how it kind of flows through? And then after that, we'll jump into the if and formula where you have multiple outcome or conditions. Awesome. So how did everyone go with the if statements? Good. Just give a thumbs up if you're happy with it all.
Okay. In that case, we'll give you guys 1 more minute. All right, let's move on. So we have and if and functions. So let's very quickly go through what and if functions are now. Do you want to go through those?
Sure. So an and function is essentially just looking at multiple different conditions and putting them kind of together. So when you have different, if you wanted to sum things, or if you wanted to do things that are different, like greater thans or subtractions, you can all put them under one single formula. So in this instance, we're going to utilize the and function with the if function. So then we have multiple conditions to get to a certain outcome. So once again, we'll do the whole if statement, which is, oops, we already had an equal sign. We'll do the whole if statement like before. Once you click tab and once you get your first bracket up, in your logical test, you want to then start typing and. And you'll see once you start typing it, it already notices it and understands what you're trying to get at, which is awesome. So once again, you can click and tab or put in a space, and we'll now be working in the and function. So here we'll have unlimited, well, n number of logical conditions. And in this instance, we're going to just do a similar function where we're going to say if this cell here, C13, which is the number 7, is greater than D13. But we're also going to look at if, well, we'll do, I guess, C8 is greater than C9. So in this instance, we're saying an AND function of it has to be this number here, this 7 here has to be greater than this number here.
You have a question?
And okay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All good. So yeah, we're just saying that this cell here is greater than this cell, and this cell has to be greater than this cell. So right now, if we just have a quick look at this, that cell is definitely greater than that one, and that one is also greater than that one. So we're kind of good on this kind of example. And then we just put a closing bracket. Make sure you put the brackets in because you'll get errors if you don't, if you forget to do them. So yeah, so once we put the closing bracket, it now notices we're back into the if function. And as you can see, we're back to the highlight of the logical test. So once again, we'll put the little comma in and we'll move to the value of true. So if it's true, we'll just say for this example that we want it to input E8, which is 99. And if it's false, we want it to put F8, which we'll put a number in right after this. So once this is all done, this function's done, make sure you put your closing brackets in. And once it's done that, it will tie it off and it won't show you anything underneath.
And you may notice that sometimes when you don't have enough brackets, it might have an error in your calculation, and it will actually tell you in some cases to correct your bracket notation, as you can see over here. So do you want to accept this correction? Most times when you press yes, it will actually correct it for you, but in some cases it might not actually correct it. So you got to make sure you have the right number of brackets. So just very quickly, if and is just an addition of if function. It's just ensuring that you have two or more different types of certain problem statements, and if they hold true with different types of calculations, then it gives you one input and then another input for the other one. So pretty much just a next step with if functions. So we'll give you guys a go with that. If you guys are all good, we can move on.
You must delete.
There we go. Okay, let's move on. So after this, you should probably see something pretty much like this with your addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, sum, if and functions, right? So once you have a table, something sort of like this, then we can move on to creating tables for our graph.
Yep.
Yep. So once you have this, we can start making tables. So why are tables so important? Well, it can be a bit boring just looking at values, right? Looking at numbers. Well, as engineers, we do look at a bunch of numbers, and I guess also for accountants as well, right? So a lot of different types of people use Excel, and we want to express this data in different other ways rather than just numbers. So that's why we use tables, right? So as you guys know, or you guys may have done before, we can insert different types of tables. I'll just go to tables. Oops. So you guys can insert charts and tables in different types of way, but we'll get into that in a bit. So with tables, you just have your you have your expressions for what each of the values are, right? And each of your values likewise. Now tables can range in different types of ways, right? You can create them in different number of ways, and again, no table is exactly the same as everyone else's. It's as long as you express different types of information properly, then you can make a table. Relatively simple. It shouldn't take too long. It's just something that I guess some people might have a bit of difficulty with. Once you guys sort of have something like this, we'll move on. In addition to that, you can also have drop-down menus for different types of table inputs that you have on your graph, but we won't be going through that today, unfortunately. So once you guys sort of have a table with you guys, we'll move on to graphs. So graphs are very important. It visually represents what you have on your Excel sheet, right? So this can be expressed in a number of different types of ways. There are so many different types of graphs that you can actually use. There's line graphs, column graphs, histograms, pie charts, endless number of graphs. So again, people can use any type of graph, but again, it's usually the one that represents information the best or one that suits you the best, right? So in some cases, some people might find a line graph a better way of representing the information that we have compared to a pie graph, for example, right? So this gives me a bit less information because it just gives me all my values instead of each individual value for each section, right? So addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, etc., etc. At least it shows me each of my values in each of the sections, right? First option, second option, and then my formula. So we'll get you guys to sort of go through that by yourselves. Give us a thumbs up when you guys are done.
Perfect. So how's everyone going with the whole creating graphs and everything?
Get a few thumbs up. Yeah.
Good.
All right.
Awesome. So there's, I guess, one area that we want to, cover is the whole idea of switching their X and Y axis. So the current tables that we've designed right now is, as you can see, it's looked like this, but sometimes tables might look in a different fashion, whereas your headings might be in the column, in the row, sorry. And you might have on the column, and you might have your data in the rows. So in that instance, we might want to try and look at what it looks like if the data was switched. So if we just look at, for instance, this, and we just get the generic 2D column graphs, and as you can see, it puts it nicely like this. It's always good to try and figure out or look at all the different elements and the different preferences you can make with your graphs, as it can get a little bit complicating at times. But in this instance, we're just going to try changing, we're going to try changing the switcher and row columns. Now you'll see once you click on the graph, it opens up two different headings up the top. So if I click off the graph, they disappear at the top. And when you click back onto it, it opens up chart designs and formats. And this is all directly related to that chart. So in this instance, it's really easy with Excel is that they have straight away the switch row column button up here. And once you do click it, what it does is it just reverses the whole data. So instead of your heading being the first option, it's now changed everything around with all the data. So down here, as you can see, your x-axis is that. So yeah, anything you want to say about?
Yep. So again, whenever you make tables and graphs, it can be done in different types of ways. So like Andre did before, he picked a column graph. Again, you can pick and you can use and make different types of graphs, anyone that you actually prefer. So let me just move this to the side very quickly. So very quickly going back to this. So again, you have different types of graphs. You have line graph, column graphs, pie charts, even dot graphs. So, and again, you also have a recommended chart. So if you feel lazy, in some cases, you can just put a recommended chart, and it actually just pops up all the different types of values or types of graphs that you can have up. And you can actually edit the colors if you really want to, edit the color scheme. If, for example, if it looks too bright or if it looks too dull, you can actually change it likewise. All right, so we'll give you guys maybe like a minute to sort of go through that, and then we'll move on. So you guys probably should have a graph up by now. Now we're going to go through what each of the stuff within your whole table actually represents, and what can we do with each of these elements. So we have a title here. So whenever we put a graph either on a Google Doc or a Word doc or even an Excel by itself, we need to know what this data represents, right? So what we can do is label this actual graph. So for example, if I said this was my homework marks, for example, I can write this accordingly. and you can have your title. Again, when you actually put a title, it can sometimes change your graph, but you can also adjust that accordingly as well by dragging it out. Now we have the legends and chart titles, labels and trend lines. So whenever we have legends, right, it represents a specific thing within your graph. So blue in this case represents my first option, right? So say if I wanted my first option to be, for example, class 1. So this was the homework marks for class 1. Then I can write class 1. Oops. Yeah.
Technical issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like Neil was saying, you can definitely format, you can change a lot of things, and it's always good. I'll just extend this because it's quite hard to see in this small version of it. But you can always look through all your different chart elements up in the top left, which is under the chart design. And here it will have all the different types of your legends as well, and where you want to place it. So this I find always the easiest kind of route to go about when you're trying to add legends, add axes, add chart titles, and any other little things you want to add. Keep in mind though that different graphs have different elements. So don't always expect that you're going to get trend lines, for instance, for each type of graph. Like you might not get it in a pie chart, for instance. So you can add trend lines, and what it does is you can choose it based on your series, and it will just add a trend line in based on how the whole option kind of went throughout all the different areas. We also have different styles that you can design your whole graphs with. So this can, be an instance when you're trying to make things look pretty for your superiors or whatever at work, or even for your university degree. So in this instance, if you like this kind of style, you can utilize it, and it saves time having to design it yourself. Sometimes the designs are a bit basic. I mean, actually, that's kind of looks pretty cool. I like that neon lighting, actually. But yeah, you can always go through and use their different, different options that they have. Obviously, choosing the same color isn't exactly going to be useful because it's hard to see. So yeah, so feel free to play around with those different styles and different graphs, and let us know if you have any questions on that.
All right, we'll give you guys about 2 minutes.
Perfect. So next we will move on to pivot tables. So pivot tables are really good when you have a large set of data and you want to summarize it into a really quick format and I guess, make it look easier to read than looking at thousands and thousands of lines. In this instance, we're only going to be utilizing the little data that if you went through the steps, there should be a little set of data that looks like the table. And we're just going to essentially copy and paste it as so. So in this instance, we'll just have a little bit more data and we'll change a few of the numbers, but just so then you can see little changes in all the pivot tables. So once you've got something that looks like this, we're going to create a pivot table. So what I usually like to do is I like to actually highlight the data first. So in this instance, we'll highlight all of this from A1 to D15. Sorry, I'm doing this one-handed. Perfect. Awesome. So once you highlight all the data, you can click Insert. It's sitting under here. Yes, there we go. We'll use the pivot table for now. This way you can actually see how everything kind of works. So we'll click onto pivot table. Now, when you've already highlighted data, it already pre-fills this first selected table or range option. You can use outside material from different sources, but we'll just use everything that we're using in this Excel. Now, per these steps, we're going to actually put this onto an existing worksheet as so. So make sure you click this radio button. If you click new worksheet, it's going to open up a new Excel doc. And the location we're going to put is we're just going to put it on a new tab. So you can add a little, sorry, I guess not. You can add, put it in elsewhere. So over here, we will put it on this tab down here. So I'll just move down to the cell and you just have to click a certain cell. It doesn't really matter. And once you're happy with all that, click OK. Here we'll open up all this information stuff, which can kind of look confronting at times, but we'll go through all these steps. So if you want to give that a crack and see how that works out. I'll give you a minute, I guess, to create a pivot table like that. And let me know if there's any problems with any of that. All right, so is there any problems with any of that? We're good? Awesome. So we'll start implementing some of the tables, the fields, and we'll just have a quick look at what it kind of each little section entails. So over here, if we look to the right, so if you want to find the pivot table fields, and for instance, you're on a pivot table, you can always just click on the pivot table. And if necessary, there's a little field list up here, which you can click on up the top. So once that's the case, you can open up a little pivot table fields, and this will show all the different headings that we previously created: the description, the first option, section option, and formula. If there's some that aren't in there, it could be because you haven't highlighted the whole data source. And if you want to make sure you have, you can always click this thing that shows in the pivot table analyze that says change data source. And by just clicking that, it will show you the data that's already been highlighted. And if you need to make changes, you can make changes as necessary. So if we just go down and have a quick look at all of these little options, we have filters, columns, rows, and values. So your filters are if, for instance, you have a date range for like the 2019 year, the 2020 year, and you want to just filter just for the 2019 year data, you can put a filter in that way, and this will change I guess, all the options. So for instance, let's just put description under filters. It will make your graph, change the design of your pivot table graph. We'll just look it down here. Just hide this data. Awesome. So as you can see here, this is just a little filter, and this is what it will look like. But as you can see, there's no data that we have to really be filtering yet. So if we start putting, let's just say, first option into values and description into rows maybe. So we can move things around, and as you can see down here, it only allows it to be in one spot at one time. So we can't have an overarching filter as well as it being in rows. So in this instance, we'll just keep it sitting in rows for now. You can always filter in the rows by clicking the little drop down arrow that it has next to it. And here you can choose which ones you actually want to see in your summarized table. Now, when I put the first option over here in under values, it automatically went to sum of first option, which is kind of good, which is what we kind of be wanting to look at right now. And what this essentially does is it sums up all the values that had the rows description next to it. So in this instance, addition has summed to 8. If we go back to our table that we created and we look at the first option for addition, 4 plus 4 is, well, 8, which is awesome. So it goes to show that it shows kind of this data correctly so far. Another thing that you can do is you can actually click onto the sum of the first options and you can change field settings. And this is important in the instance you didn't want to look at sum, but you might want to have a look at how many times addition appears in your data set. And in this case, you can use the word count. So all of these little options and summarized value fields down here change your numbers and how they're represented based on what they really are. So if you wanted to look at the biggest number, or no, sorry, the smallest number under addition or under all of the options, click OK, it will show you just the smallest number that they have there. So if you guys follow the Excel doc and give a crack at looking at all the little options that they have, and let us know if you have any problems with it. There's also a little difficult component at the end of the pivot table exercise. And if you have any problems with that while going through it, let us know as well. Neil.
Just also another thing with pivot tables, you have cell types. So for example, if you wanted to highlight, I guess, certain parts of your table and I guess make it a look neater, or maybe change it up to show specific types of information with color coding. This is a very, very good way of actually, I guess, for example, row tables, stating that if you do have a really big pivot table and a lot of headings, at least color coding is a great way to actually show and I guess make it look more appealing to the eye when using different types of data. But yeah, we'll get you guys to sort of try that out for a few minutes, and then I guess we'll sort of move on. So is everyone good with that? Can I get some thumbs up? Good, good. Okay, sweet. All right, so let's move on. So the next thing we will be going through. So once we've played around with pivot tables and we've gone through the pivot table implementation onto a different sheet again, you can put it onto this. I think you can't put it on the same sheet, can you? You can. So you can put it on the same sheet. But again, having two tables back to back within each other can sometimes look a bit messy. But again, it's up to you. Using the table fields to order different types of values. So description, first option, second option, formula, and then playing around where each of that data gets implemented, right? So, and again, another thing to note is each of your rows cannot be in each, or each of your value inputs for a table, for a line or a row, cannot be in multiple subcategories. Okay, so assuming everyone's gone through that. Okay. Yep. Okay, so let's get started on tables. Everything good on this? Everyone good with that? Okay, we'll move on to condition formatting. So condition formatting can help us with patterns and trends in your data. So again, you can only look at your data so much and either with graphs or tables to actually analyze and understand what a lot of different types of numbers actually mean. So condition formatting sort of adds a next step to that of pivot tables. So we'll get started on that.
Perfect. So if you want to just get back to your table of data, we'll just utilize this one for now. If you go back to your table of data, that kind of looks similar to like this. You can use the same numbers if you want. We're going to be utilizing the heading that says conditional formatting over here. And it's under the home tab, under the section called styles. So over here, we're going to be styling data. And as I would have said in the Excel doc, is you want to make sure, you're highlighting just the data. In this case, you do not need to worry about headings. So for instance, let's just start looking at all of these numbers that we have here, which is all our data. And we'll use the conditional formatting for multiple different things. We might be using it to highlight the cells based on certain rules. We might be wanting to have little data bars that sit next to it like that. We might want color scales, based on different color schemes. We might want little icons next to the word. So you can have all these different kind of options that they have. And you can also create your own ones if you're not happy with the ones that they've given you. So I'll just quickly go through the first one, just in regards to the highlighting of cells, just so then you can see what it looks like, and then you guys can all give a crack at all the other styles. So in this instance, we'll just highlight the cells to do greater than. By clicking onto this, we're now formatting the cells that are greater than a certain number. And keep in mind, it's not equal to, it's greater than. So in this instance, we'll just say greater than 5. Obviously, just for personal preference, I find anything greater than 5 should be green fill. And you can choose that like this. You can also just create your own custom formats or utilize just their generic ones. So in this instance, you just click OK. So what this means is it now means all of this data is now under a certain rule where if it's greater than 5, it will turn green. So if I put this cell, for instance, under 5, it will take off the green. If I put this cell to 1 over than 5, it turns to green. So as you can see, this is all kind of, live. It all represents the data as the rules state. So if you want to go give a crack of all this kind of conditional formatting and let us know, if there's any questions you have to all this. Yeah.
Yep. So we'll give you guys about, I'd say 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll sort of we'll move on from, I guess, the additional parts of condition formatting. So we have a question from Ethan. Are you able to format based on string values? I believe so. You can. String values, I think it's just individual values by itself, like within a table. Do you mind elaborating that question, Ethan? So what exactly do you mean by string values? A string is a sequence of letters. Okay.
Sequence of letters.
Letters instead of numbers. Okay. A, B, C. That's something we haven't. I've never actually used letters. I usually use numbers. So that is new to me. I don't believe so. I think I believe you can only use it for numbers. Yeah, I think you can only use it for numbers, but don't take our word for it. I think
you can kind of use conditional formatting when you're doing text that contains certain letters or words, if that's what you mean. If you're trying to do based on
words, then I don't think so.
Yeah, that's kind of the only thing that I'm aware of. Most of the conditional formatting is used when you're having values such as, I guess, numbers, because that's kind of most options are utilized for. But if it's things like text contains, then conditional formatting is utilized for that.
Okay. I hope that answers your question. Does it, Ethan? Okay, thank you. You guys should be done with the pivot tables. For what we've formatting for what we've done so far. We'll move on now. So again, with similar to graphs and I guess also pivot tables, you can also let's go back. So again, you can also do a bunch of things with the condition formatting the tables. So I guess let's try this one out. Oops. For example. All right, so you can change what your actual condition format looks like. And then, like I mentioned very briefly at the very beginning, you can change what your cell type actually represents. So for example, good, bad, neutral, and I guess, yeah. And also a heading if you really want to. And that should be that for that part. Anything else you want to add?
No, seems all pretty good.
Yep. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask for the rest of condition formatting. And then we'll go through one extra thing at the very, very end. So that's pretty much that for the StuDoc and everything we've gone through. There was one other thing that a lot of people in past have actually asked me about, and that's actually matrices. So matrices, you probably would have gone through that in maths, possibly in MM1 or MM2. And I'm not sure if do accountants use matrices, probably not. Okay, so with matrices, as you probably know, it's for example, so this will be a 3x3 matrix, right? So what can we do with matrices? Well, we can multiply matrices to get unknown values. So another thing to note is you can only multiply matrices if, so this would be a 3x3. Right, whoops, 3x3. So I can only multiply this matrix if my columns are 3 as well. So for example, if this was a 3x3 as well, then I could also multiply this matrix together, right? So for example, right. So now I have two different matrices and I want to multiply these matrices. And as you guys probably do know, matrices can be quite annoying and quite lengthy when in your calculations when doing it by hand, having to multiply each of your values from each row individually, and then I guess the sides of the next matrix. So what we can do is we can actually multiply this using mult. So what we have here is mult, which is the multiple of two matrix expressions. So we have this array here. So this is our first matrix. And as you guys probably know from the formula section, right? You always need your equal sign, okay? You need your equal sign whenever you go and start a formula question. And I guess depending on what you want to actually do, you can search it up. In this case, matrix multiplication is mmult. Then we have a bracket here and then two arrays. So whenever we have the first matrix, we put a comma, right? So that expresses the first array is done. Then the second array is your second matrix, in this case, over here, right? And when you're done, you always end it with a bracket like I mentioned. Like mentioned before, right? And at the very bottom, I should have my matrix over here. So this automatically multiplies matrices for you. And it's quite useful, especially for, I think civil, mechanical, and even electrical engineering, whenever you're going through matrix calculations. Very, very useful. I know in MM2 you don't use Excel because it is very easy to multiply matrices, and they do go through the hand-by-hand process because they want you to learn about it. The next thing I'll very quickly go through is the inverse of matrix. So what happens if you want to inverse a matrix? And as you guys probably know, inversing matrices is also very difficult. Luckily with Excel, we can use the inverse matrix. So what is matrix inverse? It is known as M inverse, right? So that gives my expression for the inverse of my specific type of matrix. So in this case, I only have one array because with inversing matrices, you do them individually. In this case, my first matrix over here, right? So B11 to D13, and then of course ending it with a bracket. If you don't put your brackets again, you'll have an error function that we mentioned before, and we don't want that. So at the very end, I should have my inverse of my matrix. So I hope you guys do know your matrices. Otherwise, this would probably be a bit difficult to understand. But I hope that also does help you because this is a common question that I do get asked. How do you solve matrices? And it's fairly straightforward. And in fact, Excel is a great way to actually solve matrices as well as the inverse of matrices. I think that should be it for our Excel workshop. Was there anything else? No? Okay, let's go back to our Google Doc slide. So going back to our PowerPoint slide. So thank you so much for attending. We have a little word from our sponsor, Canopy Study, that came to help us today. So Andre, did you have a few words about Canopy Study?
Sure. So yes, as mentioned before, I'm from Canopy Study, the co-founder for it, and our company is designed to solve problems students face at university or any sort of degree, I guess. Right now, we're kind of looking towards directly at university students, and we've released an application called Plan My Study that's designed to solve time management problems. So if you're facing problems where you don't really know what exams to study for first, or assignments to do first, or things like that, we plan your time for you on our app, and it's free on the app stores for both Android and iOS. And it helps out with that kind of aspect. And if you do use it, or you want to use it, by all means, let us know your thoughts and everything, because we're kind of, we're trying to create a product for you guys. Our second product, which we're focusing on now as well on the side, is an application called Slide Space. And this has been due to a new release of artificial intelligence that reads lectures and reads data and can provide certain things that we ask it for. And what Slide Space does is we're going to be trying to enhance lecture slides. So you might have, you might be in a lecture where you don't really know what's going on, and you're too hesitant to maybe ask the lecturer a question that you might feel is stupid. Our application kind of reads the data that's on the slides, and it will provide key takeaways or explanations, even simplified versions of it, to try and help you understand what is going on. Not only do we enhance the slides, we also provide lectures with instant feedback from students. So even if it's an offline lecture, they'll get some sort of feedback anonymously from students, so they can see how people are understanding the lectures and seeing whether they should be making changes. We've also noticed that since I'm a UTS student as well, whenever I did my exams and everything, there was always limited material to study off. They'd only give you like maybe one exam paper, and at times, one exam paper is not that great, and maybe the textbooks have questions that you don't have answers for, and the teacher never gets back to your questions. So we've created some sort of extra study material. So this will be extra questions depending on what the lecturer allows us in. So it could be, you could get up to about 60 questions where the AI reads off the lecture slides, and it will also provide things like flashcards. So this whole little new feature that we're creating is something we want to help to enhance your own study material, as well as to enhance the lectures and provide a better environment for both. So these are kind of the two little features two little applications we're working on, and with the greater vision of combining them and creating a whole thing called a Canopy Campus. And yeah, so we're all designed about and focused on helping you guys. So if you have any questions, or there's things that you want implemented, or ideas that you think that you want someone to be focusing on and no one's out there doing, by all means send us an email, or hit us up on Facebook or Instagram, which you can find that later on, or in the Engineering Society's Facebook page. But yeah, so we're a student-run startup, and we're here to help you.
Yep. So again, you can search them up on Canopy Study on Facebook and Instagram. we'll put their links up in a later date. So thank you so much, Andre, for coming. And thank you guys for coming to the Excel event. Thanks to the people from Zoom as well as the people in person. This is a recorded event, so I know a lot of people probably couldn't come because of social distancing matters, exams, and a bunch of assignments. So again, feel free to add us on Facebook if you are a member, Instagram, our website. We also have a website, and Discord and LinkedIn. For Discord, you can see our future events that are planned up, and also talk to other members that are also NSOC members. So that's great. And LinkedIn. So again, a lot of engineering students might be looking for internships, and I guess a little post about each of our events that we have planned up. Again, LinkedIn is a great way to make connections, and we would love to connect with you guys and hopefully get you guys internships with our posts. So thank you so much for coming to our Excel event. We'll have future education events planned up in the future, maybe next sem, and we'll see you guys later.